Hello, this is Chris Heasley with the Chris Heasley Radio Show. And today we're going to talk about weather modification and the hill country, the Texas hill country floods. When I was a child, the word was not conspiracy theory. The word was urban legend. And there was no shaming that came along with considering an urban legend, right? So you wouldn't hear these stories on the corporate media, but people would pass these stories around from person to person in our society in the 1980s. And again, we would talk about this stuff openly. Urban legends, we talk about it. There was no sort of shaming or, any sort of, accusatory position against people when we were talking this stuff. It was just open. We talked about it. We didn't necessarily believe urban legends, but we considered it, and we found them fascinating. And there were a whole bunch of urban legends, and so many of them are coming true today. These stories that we heard back in the 1980s when I was a child. But one story that I heard when I was a child was that the Russians were. I was told this when I was a child in the 1980s, that the Russians were manipulating weather to create thunderstorms for the purposes of weather weapons. I was told this in the 1980s, and I remember just thinking, that will never work. But that just gives you an idea of where we were back then. And but here we are today, and so many of these things are coming true, and so we have to give them a second look. And on today's show, like I said, we're going to talk about weather modification and the Texas hill country floods and see if, just put it out there, just see if there's any relationship between those two ideas. And on today's show, we have two guests on today's show. We have Joseph Olson. Joseph, how are you doing today?
Getting a lot better. I was kind of ill this summer.
Yeah, Joseph was out with pneumonia for some time, but we're glad to have you back.
I'm glad to be back.
And on the phone, calling in, we have G2. G2, are you there?
I am.
Okay, great. It's good to hear you. But let's jump right into it, guys. And Joseph, so I know you've prepared some stuff for tonight. Tell us, what you know about the ability for the government to manipulate weather.
Well, first of all, weather is the final trailing artifact of a number of different forces that are at work in the universe. And we live in a universe that's profoundly indifferent to the existence of human beings or of living things. A perfect example was we have what's called the Malkovich cycle, where you have 100,000 years of ice ages, 10,000 years of interglacial, 100,000. We happen to be at the trailing end of the interglacial, which started with the Holocene about 12,000 years ago. At that point, Canada was covered with a mile-thick ice sheet, and the ocean levels were 400 feet lower than they are today.
Was the whole world frozen 11,000 years ago during the Holocene?
Yes, both poles were frozen, far more than they were now. And then,
so the globe was basically an ice sheet.
Right.
This was 11,000 years ago. Mm-hmm.
Right. And then there was a starting of a thaw, and so things started thawing out a little bit. And then there was a giant asteroid that hit the ice sheet in Canada. It didn't leave a crater because it splattered ice chunks all the way down into the Carolinas and all the way over into North Dakota. Those are called Carolina Bays, where you have these horseshoe-shaped depressions that have a mound on one side, and they all point back to this central location in Canada.
And does that serve as the evidence of the? Is there any evidence of this? That's the
asteroid? Evidence, because some of them contain asteroid fragments, meteorite fragments, as well as the ice. But what that did was cause enormous climate change, and it killed all of the large mammals in the North American continent, which was mammoths, mastodons, saber-toothed tigers, the 600-pound dire wolves, which you can imagine what a wolf being 600 pounds.
I'd love it if those things were still alive today. That would be incredible.
Well, it'd be fun to go to Jurassic Park too, but I don't want to play with them.
Right.
Yeah, the saber-tooth. You want to see what they look like? Go to the La Brea Tar Pit Museum in Los Angeles on Wilshire Boulevard, and it's still bubbling tar today. But they've got thousands of skeletons from animals that got caught in the tar pit. But bottom line is, over a real short period of time, giant sloths, which were like 15 feet tall, all of these animals went extinct at that particular time. And so just to give you an idea, what man can do is tinker around the edges. What other forces can do is completely unbelievable. And like I said, it's profoundly indifferent.
So you're saying that any manipulation that man can do or that government can do is very minor compared to the natural evolution of the Earth.
That's correct. And so basically, we've got a whole bunch of physics involved in the planet circulating around the sun. We've got 210 million cubic miles of ocean that are absorbing sunlight and evaporating off, taking energy off of the surface of the oceans and lakes, going up into the clouds, reflecting sunlight back into the clouds, evaporating off the bottom of the clouds where it's the warmest, going up and condensing, which is releasing that energy. And so bottom line is we've got this natural refrigeration cycle in the atmosphere, and what they figured out how to do was be able to manipulate high pressure and low pressure cells using radio waves to heat up the ionosphere. And when
Real quick, who's they?
Portions of our government, it's conjunction with Air Force, NOAA, DOD. They're all heavily involved in doing this.
So our government figured out how to heat up our ionosphere.
Correct.
And real quick, what is, for the audience, what is the ionosphere?
That's the upper part of the atmosphere.
Okay, so, and they figured out how to heat up that part or everything up to that part?
Well, that's what they do. They can use selected radio frequencies, and they can direct the radio frequency at a particular air mass. And air, when you heat it up, it expands. I don't know if you've ever taken a half-empty soda bottle and put it in the refrigerator and you see how it crinkles up.
Yeah.
You know, and so it's highly expansive. And so if you heat up the ionosphere, you can create a high-pressure cell, and the high-pressure cell is capable of pushing the air around it. And so it's able to steer currents. So you're able to steer like hurricanes, and you can hold them in a position where they're over warm water so that you can build a hurricane up in strength. You are able to position them over an area like, say, Houston during Harvey, where you had 10,000 square miles that got 44 inches of rain across the whole entire area in a 48-hour period.
Okay, real quick. They heat up the ionosphere, and that creates the storm, or that directs the storm?
It directs the storm, and it's also able to amplify the storm. But to my knowledge, they're not able to seed the storm. The storms are seeded from dust clouds, and they're seeded in the warm waters of the storms that we get in the central part of the United States.
So when they want to create these natural disaster events for whatever political purposes, are they just sitting back waiting for a storm to create on its own, and then they amplify it and direct it? Is that what happens?
That's what it appears to be able to do.
Okay.
So, anyhow, and the first weather modifications was done in the 1890s. They were firing cannons and using balloons and using silver nitrate to seed clouds. And silver nitrate is real small molecule that allows water to condense around it. So you put that up in moist air, and next thing you know, you can start forming clouds, and then the clouds will get large enough that it can actually start dropping rain.
Real quick, you said this in the 1890s they started figuring this
That's
stuff
when
out?
they first started using silver nitrate for that particular purpose.
Do they shoot it up in the air? Is that how they do it? Or
That's how they did back then. But then during the Vietnam War, we had what was called Operation Popeye. And this went from October 1966 until October 1972, where they seeded clouds over Laos and the southern part of North Vietnam in order to make the Ho Chi Minh Trail unable
Unbearable.
to travel. Yeah, it was like just made it into a mud trough.
yeah.
And so
See, that's what I remember when I was a child, the Vietnam War vets coming home and saying that our government was dropping monsoons on the Vietnamese army. Our soldiers were saying that, our returning veterans. And yeah, go ahead, huh?
And then they had the church hearings on all the nasty stuff that the CIA had been up to. And in the church hearings, which was declassified in 1974, they, and this is according to Seymour Hersh, in hearings in 1975 is when they disclosed that, yes, they were using silver nitrate, they were seeding the clouds, they were successful, and they did it for years.
Okay, what year was the church hearings?
74 and 5.
So they admitted to Operation Popeye in 74, 75 right away?
Oh, they admitted to a whole bunch of stuff. That's when they admitted to the heart attack gun.
Okay, one thing at a time. So one of the things I remember is seeing a Democrat senator.
A place where there was a venting of methane and it happened to be under a bunch of dried out tree leaves, and next thing you know, you've got the same thing in the Bible, the burning bush. Well, it's sitting there burning for days because it's sitting on top of a methane vent, and it just happened to catch on fire. So there's certainly natural conditions that can create and sustain these things that we're not fully aware of because people just aren't looking at it.
But the chances of it being natural are incredibly slim. If I'm right, correct?
Well, and then also fire was used extensively by the Native Americans to drive buffalo herds off of cliffs, to clear areas to plant farm crops, used in warfare. So bottom line is, I think it's George Washington that said fire is a helpful servant but a terrible master, something like that. And it's like, yeah, it can really be something that's really destructive.
But simultaneously erupting fires across thousands of miles over and over again, not 1 year, year after year.
Yeah.
It begs the question, how are all these fires starting at exactly the same moment in time?
Well, yeah, you start running out of coincidences. I like the Ian Fleming quote, once is a happenstance, twice is a coincidence, and three times is a state action. And so he's the one that wrote the James Bond novels, and he was a former MI6 guy, so I think he pretty much knows what he's talking about. If it happens three times in a row, kids, it's something that's state action.
Well, I think we covered everything very, very thoroughly. Any other final thoughts on weather modification in the Hill Country floods?
Gosh, I wish I had a few more. I'm sure I'll think of a bunch of them on the way back home. But.
Okay, well, because I'll close it out this way. If you don't mind, Joseph,
yes.
Did you have something else you want to say? Because I could close that out a different way if you like.
No, that's cool. Go ahead.
Okay, so an incredible discussion, but I just want to share with the audience one more thing. In the studio prior to the show, Joseph was sharing with me technologies that have been discovered in the 1960s that regenerate the growth of limbs. And there's another truth or theory, conspiracy theory, whatever you want to call it, called the med beds. And it is this concept where the government has this technology to regenerate your body, to regrow limbs, to cure cancer, cure different ailments. It's just an amazing technology. And I study all these theories. I don't care what kind of name you call me. I will study the theory. I've never been able to find anything to confirm this theory until now, which we're not going to get into it tonight. We'll do another show on it. But Joseph was telling me that in the 1960s, there was a doctor who was able to basically confirm this ability to regrow limbs and things of that sort. Just give us 2 minutes on it, Joseph.
Yes, sir. Okay, this is a program that I did for Coast to Coast AM back in November of 2020, and it's based on a book called Body Electric by Robert O. Becker, who is an orthopedic surgeon at University of VA Hospital at Syracuse University. And he was able to do regeneration of lost limbs on lab rats in 1965. They could decorticate the spine and regrow it, and it's all based on using milliamp and millivolt DC currents running through your motor and sensory nerve circuits. Extremely interesting material, and we'll be doing a future show on that. But I highly recommend my article is a book review, Body Electric Secrets, and it's at Principia Scientific International, or you can look up principia-scientific.org or .com. And the name of the article, again, is Body Electric Secrets. You should be able to find it just by Googling that particular title and then either my name or Principia Scientific. It's a really well-read article, and it's really well written. But he ran into a problem because he was saying that there's that same interference from high-tension high-tension power transmission and radio waves. And the DOD, who happens to be the one in charge of all health spending in the United States, they're the parent organization over NIH, they said that it's okay if you want to regrow, some guy's broken spinal column, but we're not going to let you put Motorola and General Electric out of business. And so they defunded him in 1965, and he got around to writing his book in 1985. But it's really a great book, and it's a great subject, and I think a lot of people will be interested in knowing how your body actually works, and how a salamander can regrow a whole half of its head if it's cut off. How planaria can grow 4 planarias if you cut it in 4 pieces. A starfish can grow 5 starfishes from being cut in pieces. But if you cut off your finger, you have a hell of a time regrowing just that finger. But that technology existed in 1965.
That's going to be an incredible episode. We will have you back for that episode, and I can't wait to hear about it. And that's it, guys. I appreciate everyone. G2, any final thoughts before we cut out?
There are a lot of questions to ask. There are a lot of answers we need. And it's important that we keep exploring things, even if they seem unlikely, because often we find out, like with the HAARP machine, what's unlikely is sometimes real.
Yep. We have more questions than answers.
Stay curious.
Yeah. All right, guys. Well, this is Chris Heasley with the Chris Heasley Radio Show. On Thursday night, we will be covering everything Harris County, everything Houston, Texas, from a political landscape. So we hope you can tune in Thursday at 7. Have a great week.